G'day, it's a Saint here, and here I am with KENSINGTON25 or William Broome. How are you, William?
I'm very good, how are you?
Yeah, pretty. I spoke to you was here in front of this fountain here. We could probably edit the same thing and people would think there's no change.
It's the same video.
It's the same video, but a lot's happened.
A lot's happened. I went to England for Christmas for the first time in about 3 or 4 years for Christmas. Had a great time. Usually I go back to England and I just want to get back to Australia. But this time I had quite a good trip. So I was saying, do I want to go back? Don't I want to go back? But I did come back, and you know what? I'm really glad to be back. I love Australia and I love Sydney.
I got the impression from your videos up there that when you were over there, you kept saying you couldn't wait to come back. That's the impression I got.
You see, the problem is, when it gets dark at 3:30 in the afternoon and doesn't get light until about 8 the next morning, you get very depressed. But thankfully, at Christmas, the one bit of respite you've got in the English winter is you've got Christmas, and you either love or you hate Christmas. But because I was with family, I had quite a good time this year. But it was definitely interesting, and I had loads of fun, but I did miss Australia. And although the fireworks were great in London, you can't beat the ones in Sydney on New Year's Eve. They were absolutely fabulous.
I've never seen the fireworks in London. I've got friends from London who talked about the greatest in the world for the London Eye, and they were talking about there's going to be a river of fire down the Thames, you know, and all of this.
It never quite happened that way, did it?
There was no river of fire, was there?
We do try though. I remember they were in the Millennium Dome and you had Tony Blair standing next to the Queen, and they were doing Auld Lang Syne and all holding hands, and the Queen, I've never seen her look so uncomfortable. Poor woman. Gotta love her. Like only a mother would.
That's what I thought was really interesting with the video, if you have a chance to watch it, The Queen. It's just called The Queen, which is a story of the Queen. And there's some funny lines in there about Labor politicians just can never quite get the Queen, and Tony Blair's wife says, why is it that Labor politicians always fall in love with the Queen? They never can quite understand it, you know?
It's true, they say her favourite Prime Minister was Harold Wilson. And it's funny, all these socialist Prime Ministers on the Labour Party, they always seem to get on so well with the Queen. My suspicion is the Queen respects them because they are in touch with the people. That's what I think it could be. But all her favourite MPs, or all her favourite politicians, Prime Ministers, have apparently really been Labour politicians and Labour Prime Ministers. And as for Margaret Thatcher, there were always rumours about her having a big rivalry and not liking her.
That doesn't surprise me, because Mrs Bouquet, a la Margaret Thatcher, was a bit of a two-bob snob wannabe sort of nouveau riche. Queen would have seen right through that. I think she treated Tony Blair as her little grandson. That was a really interesting relationship there.
She did, and that movie was absolutely brilliant, and the man who played Tony Blair really caught him perfectly. And yes, he was like her grandson, because he was this privately educated boy but was a Labour politician, and they actually came from similar backgrounds in many ways.
That's really interesting, isn't it? So, holiday in other countries too? You went around Europe?
I didn't do so much of Europe. I did go to Paris for a few days and had a great time. I've always loved Paris. Well, actually, I tell a lie. The first time I went to Paris, I hated it. But it grew on me. It's almost sometimes like a museum piece, and you don't want to touch anything in case it breaks. But it's a city that I absolutely love now. They do delicious hot chocolates. You've got the Champs-Élysées, you've got the Seine, you've got the Louvre, and so much culture and so much history. And that's one of the things I do miss about Europe. And of course, Australia's got its own history. It's got its own culture. It's got its own Aboriginal culture. It's got its own history of immigration. All the immigrants have brought their own heritage with them. So, you know, a lot of people will knock Australia, but Australia's got so much here as well. And that's why I love Sydney. There is a lot. If you want to discover it, there's so much to see, and there is so much to do.
Would it be nice to be able to spend every summer in Australia and every summer in Europe and not have any winter at all? Some people have that sort of...
You're landing in Sydney, you see the beaches, you see the blue sky, you see the harbour. It does look like a paradise. And is it or isn't it?
Well, there's no such thing as a perfect city, and Sydney certainly has its problems, but yeah, that is the problem. It looks too good. They say it gets its tentacles into you and you just can't leave the place, you know.
I'm hooked. You know, every time I go away from Sydney, I have to come back. I am always dragged back. Quite willingly, I have to say. I don't run very fast. It's like, catch me, please, chase me. But I love it here. It's an absolutely brilliant city. Yes, it's got its underbelly. Yes, it's got its downsides. But there is so much beauty here. And it's always when foreigners come here and visit, and they tell me how amazing it is, or I leave the city, I start really appreciating it. The thing is, never take it for granted. It's got its bad side. But there is so much beauty here as well. You've just got to find it, or it'll find you.
Yeah. I chose Sydney. Sydney didn't choose me. I was from Melbourne. And there's always an argument, which is a better Sydney. And I've always thought that argument is a ridiculous argument because they are so completely different cities. You just cannot compare them. I love Melbourne just as much as I like Sydney. But
you can't. They're both very different cities in their own right. For me, Sydney is very much an Aussie city, almost American, touches of Asia, and it's absolutely beautiful. Melbourne is a much more European city, but they're both totally different cities, and I would never compare the two. They're wonderful cities in their own right, and you know, this rivalry, it's a silly rivalry because they're both wonderful and exciting places, and I love being in both. Am I diplomat? I don't know.
Very diplomatic. There is a Melbourne gathering in March. Have you thought of going down?
Do you know what? With Mardi Gras and looking for somewhere new to live, I haven't even thought about it. It depends when in March, but yeah, I'd love to go. And I think there's one on the Gold Coast later in the year as well. I'd like to go to that because I've never been to the Gold Coast. But I love Melbourne. Any reason or any excuse for me to visit Melbourne, and I'll be there. So hopefully, 50-50 at this point, but I would love to be there. Melbourne, here I hopefully come.
Well, it's hooroo from me.
And hooroo from him.